we were sent there to provide perimeter security to this radar installation. Basically, this radar station was tracking supposedly drug aircraft that were exiting in and out of Peru and Bolivian airspace. Basically, what we were doing there, we had live ammo and weapons. And one day, Sergeant Allen and the other sergeant, and I'll remember his name soon, Sergeant Atkins. They were and Sergeant Montalegre, and he was a staff sergeant, E7. I mean, excuse me, E6. The other guys were E5 sergeant, and they came to us and said, "Look, we got a situation where we have an aircraft crash that's possibly friendly, and they need us to go and secure the crash site." And we're like, "Fine." So this is early. This is late at night. I know about 11 or 12 at night, and I was on guard duty that night, so I was already up, and it was my shift. We have 12-hour shifts, 12 on, 12 off, and where we rotate our section. So we all went out that night. We got up, I don't know, 3 or 4 in the morning and headed out in Humvees. We had about 5 or 6 Hummers, and we drove to where we needed to go, and then from there, we had to hump through the bush. So we got there, I don't know, 6, 7, just when daylight had just started to get light. And well, we found the area really easy because there was a huge gash in the land where something had crashed, and it didn't break anything. I don't know if you've ever been to a crash site where you had trees just broken like in half. Everything was burned, and it was like if you had almost cut like a warm butter with a knife. I mean, it was just it's like something on fire or had or some kind of energy like a laser almost had like gutted. I mean, it was really strange. And anyway, I was in the front with Sergeant Allen and Sergeant Atkins. We were up front, and we were point basically, and we were like, I don't know, 10, 20 meters ahead of everyone else. We all had maps and radios and compasses, so we knew so we wouldn't get lost. And basically, we were the first ones to see the object. And basically, what happened is we didn't go straight up the hill because basically this thing went up the hill and then off into the side of the ravine or the ridge. This is about a 200-foot ridge at least. Solid granite. I mean, it's rock. I don't know if it's granite. It was buried in the side of the cliff. But anyway, we didn't go straight up. We went on to the left and walked up to the top of the ridge. And that's when we saw the craft. This is a huge ship, and I used to be into sci-fi movies when I was a kid, but this is nothing like I'd ever seen. And when I first saw it, I was scared. It scared the heck out of me. I didn't know what to do, and it was just it was really confusing. So we all climbed down, and it was buried for about a 45-degree angle and into the side of the into the side of the cliff there, the ridge. And I mean, this is a steep cliff. I mean, it's straight up and down, and it was dripping this serp like serp viscosity, this liquid. It was everywhere, all down everywhere when we went down there because there was plants and everything, and it was weird. It was a purplish green color, and it was a greenish purple, and it kind of like fluctuated. Like you couldn't really when you'd look at it one time, then you look at it again, and it would it's almost like it. I don't know if it was like alive and it was just changing, but every time you looked at it, you saw a different shade of greenish purple. It was just strange. There was one light on it that slowly went around, and the machine I could hear it. I could hear, I guess, because it was still functioning, and it had like a hum to it, like a really bass. Like say if you unplugged an amp from a guitar, that kind of it was really it was really deep, and it kind of fluctuated, and then finally it just cut off, and everything just seemed to stop except the colors and the shades, and it was still that way. When I was looking at the craft, it was buried, so I could see the back of it, and there were these large vents. Well, they look like vents, sort of like a fish gill on the back. I couldn't see around the other side, and I guess I'm assuming that it was the same way on the other side. That looked like I don't know that could have been used for propulsion. I'm not sure. Uh, again, this liquid that had come out of the ship it got on my camis, and it discolored them and ate them almost like acid. And then it ate some of the skin off, excuse me, the hair off my arms, and and I didn't know that until later on. But basically, when I was down there with the ship, there was three holes. And I guess I'd assume that they were hatches, but there's no way to tell. They were not flush with with the body, the main body of the craft. They're, I don't know, a few inches below. I knew there was one on top because you could slightly see it. I don't know about the other side, but there was another hatch, the same width and diameter or whatever of the top hatch, and it was kind of crooked to the side, and it was half open. And I didn't see any lights or anything coming out of it, but I felt this presence that it's real strange. I guess it was almost like I think I told Leslie this. I thought the creatures were they conned me, and it was like weird. And I think they were trying to communicate with me, like I guess telepathically. It's really weird, and I don't believe in any of that stuff. But anyway, it was I could hear like, and it was terrible because it kept going, and then it still comes and goes. It's like basically sitting in your car and turning on like an AM station that's not that it's just white noise and it's turning it up really high, and that's what I heard when I first got in there. This is pretty crude two-dimensional drawing, but this is jungle here, and this was the craft, and it was embedded in the rock like this, and I'm not sure if this tapered off or how it went, but these right here are the hatches. These two objects here. This one was the one that was half open, and you could see into it, but I mean, it was just black. It was like looking into a closet. 10 meters in width and about 20 meters in length. I'm just not sure. That's just an estimate from what I remember. But it was huge. I mean, it was big, man. And it was shaped like almost like between an egg and like a teardrop almost. And it looked really aerodynamic, at least in the shape. But the closer I was close enough to take out detail on it that it was not just smooth. There was bumps and notches and things in it. It was really organic. It was almost like art. That's really how you would. It didn't look like something that somebody made in a shop. It didn't have that clunkiness or that tin can kind of deal. It was more of art. I would say. It looked to be that it could have been handmade, but out of what and what materials I don't know. Definitely nothing like titanium. It wasn't. It See, this is the whole thing. It looked metal, but it didn't have any reflection on it, man. I mean, the sun's coming down, and if you got something made of metal, regardless of it, I mean, maybe if it's subdued with paint and it's got a cami sheen on it, you're not going to see any reflection. But I could see the different shades of the craft. They didn't shine. It just like it was. It didn't reflect anything, and I guarantee if I threw like a flashlight on it, it wouldn't have reflected it. Yes, there was life forms in the ship. I could they were. It's almost like if someone was like reading your mind, and that's the way it felt. And I felt like I felt a presence. It was like supernatural. It was no debris that I saw, but there were big gashes in the rear of the aircraft, and what it looked like is that it had been hit with maybe a surface to air missile. There were a couple Hawk batteries, and that's a homing all the way killer. That's a low to medium surface to air anti aircraft missile. And basically, it doesn't have to hit the target in order to destroy the target. What it does is it gets in proximity of it, and it has a high explosive fragmentation warhead, and it basically explodes like a big shotgun in the vicinity of the targeted area. And by fragmentation, it's supposed to destroy the target or damage it so it won't be able to continue its mission. I think we shot it down. This is what I think happened: is we shot it down. The Peruvians shot it down. The other guys knew it was flying. I knew that these aircraft were flying because I had been in the command center there at the radar installation, and I heard a couple women there in the Air Force talking about aircraft flying in and out of the atmosphere at Mach 10 plus. So these aircraft are flying around there. They're re-entering the atmosphere and whatever. And I believe that the higher ups knew it was fun in the area. And these were these large vents. They looked like they went into the craft, but I couldn't tell. But it was a shadow. That was the only thing that really cast a shadow. The rest of this, well, that was another thing. Was these vents casted a shadow where you could see where there wasn't light, but the sun was shining right on the object, and it didn't cast a shadow, not on anything. And it was like kind of like absorbing the light. It's weird. This is not one of ours because in Stinger school they teach you about all different kinds of aircraft and stuff like that. And I knew a lot of aircraft anyway because I like reading about aircraft and data and that stuff. And well, essentially when I saw it, I'm like, man, this is nothing that I know of.
Can you tell us, Dr. Mitchell, exactly what the locals of Roswell told you, if you could remember specifics?
Well, on the mic.
Yeah. Okay.
The essence was that the Roswell event was an alien craft, that it was not of this planet. That's the essence. What they really told me was their particular, each one had some particular part of it, like a sheriff's deputy was controlling traffic but heard from what the other people what was going on. The family of the undertaker told about the small coffins that were created for the alien bodies. And my Air Force family friend said yes, he had heard the same thing from Major Brazel. And each one of them just told what their portion of the activity was all about. So putting it all together, the sum total was, yes, it was an alien spacecraft.
After I came back from space and was lecturing around and visiting back home, some of them came to me and pulled me aside and told me their story, that they had been shut up after the Roswell incident. And they were now older. They didn't want to take their story to the grave, and they wanted it out. And they figured I was trustworthy since I was a local boy and had been to the moon. It would be okay if I took their story. So I promised them I wouldn't tell their names, but I would carry their story forward. A few years ago, 10 years ago, I did take the story to the Pentagon. I did have a meeting with high-level intelligence people, the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I did tell the story with a couple of other, with another naval officer and Stephen Greer, Dr. Stephen Greer, if you've heard that name, and told my story of what I knew about the Roswell incident, and subsequently had it confirmed that it was true, and that the individual who I told this with had tried to get into it to find out personally about the information, and he was rejected, as many others have been rejected, to have firsthand knowledge of the cover-up. In any event, however, the fact that the Roswell incident was real has been confirmed.
Wendell Stevens was a lieutenant colonel in technical intelligence in the U.S. Air Force and is now a UFO investigator.
Now having an extraterrestrial vehicle and some bodies in their hands, didn't know when the next one would come down, where they came from, what they were going to do about it. There were a lot of unanswered questions. And the United States was in a turmoil at the time administratively because we were shifting from a war economy and a military-industrial command structure to a civilian structure. So the military was still dominant, and they wanted to keep control of this until they knew what was happening. So they created, and remember, General Marshall was our Secretary of State at the time. He was a five-star general. These people selected certain representatives from the military-industrial complex that they controlled, generals and admirals and certain scientists that worked with the military and worked with industrial planning. These men were designated as a task force to take charge of any event that followed. And one did. Almost a year later, on the 25th of March of 1978, the next one came down, 1948, the next one did crash, and it came down under observation by radar, so that we knew where it landed at the time that it struck the ground, and a helicopter was over it in less than an hour. It reported what it observed, and the plan generated by these people from the military-industrial complex after the Roswell crash was immediately put into place. All of the generals and admirals and advisors and scientists were contacted and ordered to proceed to a base in Colorado, where they were picked up and driven to the crash site. Now all of these men have gone to the scene to see for themselves what an alien vehicle looks like, and they were going to advise General Marshall directly, who was controlling everything from remote position from telephones, on how to proceed. And when an operation is that big, you can't cover everything up. We discovered that the owner of the property where the vehicle came down was arrested in his house with his family, and they were kept in the house for 4 days, not allowed to go outside or anything. All the roads in the area were blocked. All access was closed. People that lived close enough to know something about it were kept in their houses. Now, if it never happened, then this evidence wouldn't exist. But now we are finding solid evidence that something strange did happen, and that these events actually took place. Then we found people who observed the recovery of the craft from a distance, that saw the task force moving across off roads over country to a secure military facility at Los Alamos. And with these leads, we were able to turn up other witnesses, all of whom had been sworn to secrecy by their superiors at the time they participated in these events. And only a few of them would talk to us, and only on condition that they not be identified because of their vulnerability. What happens in a case of violation of security oaths of this nature, they could lose all pay and allowances due or ever to become due. They could be imprisoned. They could be fined a lot of things that none of them could stand.
I received documents which said that a UFO had landed in the middle of White Sands, New Mexico proving grounds, and that this object was inert, was under surveillance, and would be kept under surveillance until they could determine whether it was hostile or friendly. It later turned out that it was friendly in that the occupants were dead, and when we got aboard there were 5 bodies. The bodies were diminutive in size, in other words 3.5 feet. The largest one was just under 4 feet. 2 of them were obviously the commanding officers because 2 of them wore epaulets on their shoulders. Later turns out that they were all male. When we flew them back to Wright-Patterson, of course, the examination, physical examination, and the autopsy, of course, revealed that they were indeed all male. I think what has happened over the years, the government has lied so much that they have painted themselves into a corner, and it's almost impossible for them to tell the truth today.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Clifford Stone. I was a Sergeant First Class, United States Army. I had a secret clearance with nuclear assurity. I could get the clearance that I needed to do whatever it was that was necessary for me to do at the time on special operations when I was called in on those. What I'm referring to here is that I was involved in situations where we actually did recoveries of crashed saucers, for lack of a better term, debris thereof. There were bodies that were involved with some of these crashes, also some were alive. While we were doing all this, we were telling the American public there was nothing to it. We were telling the world there was nothing to it. I'd like to go into detail on some of the cases, about the nuts and bolts cases right here, but I will be available if you have any questions concerning my involvement in this. You can talk to Dr. Greer to arrange for me to get to talk to you. But the whole situation is, we've set back, we've told the American people that there's no such thing as UFOs. I've been involved where we have recovered these objects. We know them to be of extraterrestrials. In 1969, I had an event that happened to me while I was stationed at Fort Lee, Virginia. We went to Indiantown Gap, Pennsylvania. That would be my first exposure to any time that we would be recovering an unidentified flying object. When we went there, we already had people that was already in the facility. We were a backup team, which was supposed to be NBC because there was supposed to be some nuclear materials that was on board this craft. Later on, most people involved were to be told that there was nothing on board it was nothing more than just a crash of one of our aircraft. I know better, because I was one of the people that approached it with a Geiger counter to get surface readings. I was the first person to go ahead and see that there were bodies on it. That would be the first of approximately 12 events. UFO crashes are not events that take place every day. They're rare. I know we're not alone in the universe. I know that the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. It's evidence that has been denied to the American people. I stand before you today in my almighty God, and I tell you this. If Congress calls me in and says, will you testify in detail what you know, I stand here today prepared and ready to do just that. Governments must never lie to the people for no reason. Thank you.
There was an extensive annex based upon one of the UFOs had crashed in northern Germany right near the Baltic Sea. It had crashed very near where the Russian and British zones came together. This was a disk that was 30 meters across in diameter and 5 meters thick. It crashed, and the British Army retrieved it with the British Engineer Battalion, and they somehow learned how to take the object apart. They were able to get inside of it, and they learned somehow to break it down into pie wedge-shaped pieces. And they hauled those pieces away on what we call lowboy trucks, and hauled them away, and I understood that they were actually turned over to the Americans. This was a crash, and in the object were small bodies, approximately 12 of them. They were small gray creatures with large heads. When they concluded the study in 1964, they published 15 copies. They gave it the Cosmic Top Secret Clearance classification with an additional classification of eyes only and need to know. One copy was provided to the Secretary General of NATO. One copy was in the personal possession of General Lyman Lemnitzer, who was the Supreme Allied Commander. And copies were provided to most of the senior military representatives of the NATO alliance at that time. I think the German government knows full well what's going on. I think they're well aware of the assessment. And I know that there is a German agency at a very high level in the German Defense Agency that is involved with UFO research. Every major allied organization and allied nation in Europe has an office, an agency, a high-level representative who works on UFO research. The implications of the conclusions of the study were so astounding that the decision was made that they could not release this information because it would be terribly disruptive to the populations of Europe and the United States, actually to the populations of the world, that we were being surveyed by highly advanced, high-technology extraterrestrial cultures. One of the major conclusions was that one of those civilizations, the people looked exactly like we did. And that troubled the military people in SHAPE headquarters because it became quite apparent to them that these aliens could put on a suit and a tie or sport jacket, sit next to you in a restaurant, sit next to you on a bus, or walk up and down the corridors of SHAPE headquarters, and you'd never know. That troubled the generals a lot. The evidence seems to be overwhelming to me, that we've had an intimate interrelationship with them for several thousand years. I have concluded, as has Zecharia Sitchin, that the human race has probably been seeded here by high-intelligence civilizations from other places. I think those who placed us here and those who have been intimately involved with our genetic manipulation and growth are interested in us. I think they're concerned with us. I think they are related to us. And I think that that's why they're so involved. One of the conclusions of the study was that there was a program or a process, some kind, taking place. There seemed to be some sort of a planned and organized procedure unfolding. They had evidence from the study that this phenomenon had been going on for a very, very long time, and there seemed to be some kind of an intelligent plan involved. They never were able to conclude what that would be, But that was quite a concern to the senior generals because they didn't, even at that time, know what the motives were for these extraterrestrial intelligences. I've been studying this phenomenon for over 30 years, and I'm convinced that we're reaching a point where not only do we have to educate the people of the planet, but I think the aliens themselves are going to make themselves known before too long. Well, there's a danger that the public would panic if they haven't been educated, if they haven't been given some kind of an inculcation, some idea of what's going on. And that's one of the reasons why I've decided to speak out about the matter.
But you can imagine what would have happened to the stock market if something were to come out, be announced by the government or world governments as something of this nature. So they refer to it officially as the cultural shock.
Stringfield's interest in the UFO phenomena was piqued when in World War II he encountered what became known as Foo Fighters, mysterious balls of light in the sky that plagued and harassed pilots. Stringfield claims that the U.S. government has even recovered alien crafts and bodies and has detailed his findings in several research papers.
These are first-hand bits of information from sources who have seen the craft and or the bodies in government custody. These are people who had the need to know, access clearance to see the bodies, for instance, at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base or other areas, or did participate in a retrieval operation.
If the government has in fact retrieved alien spacecraft, why haven't they released that information to the public?
Obviously, if you have some extraordinary technology, you don't really want someone else to know that you have that, especially if you don't know how to use it.
Actually, the government has been giving us tidbits, according to Stringfield.
I think there have been periods where there have been attempts to educate the public or spoon-feed, as I say, the public with bits of information. So if something suddenly dramatic should happen, there wouldn't be complete alarm.
John Lear, son of Learjet inventor William Lear, is one of the world's most decorated aviators. His revelations were instrumental in exposing the covert activities at Area 51.
I think they used it as an underground area to hide recovered discs as early as 1948 or 49. They're here, they have an agenda, and there's not the slightest thing we can do about it. At least 35 separate different craft. We were being visited by at least 10 different species of aliens.
Figure 18 is the granddaddy of UFO conspiracy stories. John Lear is an interesting man with an interesting background, associations with various intelligence agencies, and I owe him a debt of gratitude because he did help me when I initially began my UFO research.
He told you he was at the scene of a UFO crash. What's his name? John Lear came to the station with a pile of UFO documents and was trying to interest our managing editor in doing a story about UFOs.
The government established an intensive program of ridicule against anyone who said they saw flying saucers.
Airline Captain John Lear suspects the government has known...
Fear of ridicule was the foundation on which the cover-up was placed.
Lear hinted that he knew someone who had intimate knowledge of the saucer program, and so I kept bugging him to allow us to meet this person, which turned out to be Bob Lazar.
In 1989, Bob Lazar, a nuclear physicist, came forward with a fantastic story. He claimed he had worked on recovered alien craft at a top-secret government facility.
It's kind of a long story how I became employed at that facility south of Area 51. It's called S4. I was originally employed at Los Alamos National Labs in New Mexico. While at Los Alamos Labs, I ran into Dr. Edward Teller. Edward Teller was essentially the father of the hydrogen bomb. It was he who came up with the original concept of the fusion device. I sent a resume out to him. He put in a good word for me, and I was granted an interview.
He came over here after one or two of them. He would say, John, they said that you're just interested in being my friend to get information on the F-117. I said, no, that's true. And that's not true. I'm just interested in UFOs.
Well, we had to sign an agreement essentially relieving us of our constitutional rights. Usually, if you're employed by someone, it's very clear as to who's in charge. But the way things were set up here, I don't know. I know on my pay stub, it was from the Department of Naval Intelligence.
In December 1988, Bob came in the evening, sat down in that chair. I was writing out bills. And he says, John, I saw a disc today. And I said, what? And he said, I saw a disc today. And I said, theirs or ours? And he said, theirs. And I said, you saw a flying site. Did you go up to the test site? He said, yeah, I just got back. I said, then what are you doing here? And I said, they obviously followed you. Why don't you find out what's going on and then tell us?
At close range, what I witnessed, craft approximately 52 feet in diameter, 15 feet high. It's quite an unbelievable sight to see something that size lift completely silently. Later on, I was allowed inside the craft to see how the reactor was placed and how the gravity amplifiers were configured inside there. That was phenomenal feeling. Entering the seats inside the craft were much smaller than a human could use. It was obvious that this was not meant for people to fly in. There was only one vehicle that I worked on, though there were 9 total in different states of repair or disrepair. We really don't know how the fuel was manufactured. We just know that it was in the craft, and we were actively trying to find out what reaction it was undergoing to produce the energy to drive the craft.
I remember a particular evening in January. Bob Keenan's eyes were bright. He said, John, you will never know what it's like to see your first alien. I said, you're kidding. It couldn't have been a midget. No. Couldn't have been a doll. No. That was it. He was absolutely positive.
What I did see was what I believe to be autopsy photos. It was a creature, and its chest was cut open in a T fashion, the skin peeled back. There were also photos of one single large organ that was removed that was also cut up and being weighed. Whether or not they're absolutely authentic, I can't say. I can only assume, because I was working on a craft that I know to be of alien in nature, that the other material that came along with it was probably authentic also. They are actively and have in their possession alien spacecraft, and they are actively undergoing analysis.
And flying them?
And flying them.
Bob Lazar is an engineer and physicist who says he worked on flying saucers for the U.S. government at Area 51. He drew these sketches of one of 9 different saucers he says the government has in a secret warehouse. Lazar gave the saucers each names according to their various shapes. Top Hat, the Sport Model, the Jello Mold. Called in to help figure out how they work, Lazar says the saucers are powered by an antimatter generator, fueled with an element which he says could only have come from another planet.
They set up and produce their own gravitational field. Just as the Earth holds all matter down, they produce that same field, but out of phase, and it repels itself. The effects that can cause, the way in which everything operates is by all intents and purposes magic. I mean, it is so far beyond our level of technology.
I started out extremely skeptical about this whole thing. I thought this was just rubbish from the tabloids, but I was surprised to find thousands of U.S. government documents from intelligence agencies that tended to indicate that there was a little bit more to this than met the eye. So I went to seek guidance from the various highest levels of the United States intelligence community, and I was quite alarmed at what I was able to learn.
Now, we are, in this report that we're now going to show, we're going to hear a conversation featuring you. Tell me the context of that conversation.
Well, I had contacted Admiral Bobby Ray Inman, who was the head of the National Security Agency in the United States, Deputy Director at CIA, Director of Naval Intelligence, and a variety of intelligence posts, a technologist, and clearly someone that, if this was really accurate, that there really were UFOs and non-human intelligence around, this is a man who had to know. Mm-hmm. So I was able to contact him thanks to a contact through Admiral Lord Hill Norton here in the UK. And this conversation, he alarmingly not only indicated that these issues were covered under national secrecy laws, but that the United States government did in fact have possession of the hardware associated with this. In other words, this was an actual physical phenomenon.
A craft, a spaceship.
Several of them, and they were in operational condition, which I assume suggested that they had been in contact, that they had been given these craft for some reason or another, because they certainly weren't crashed vehicles.
Do you anticipate that any of the recovered vehicles would ever become available for technological research?
outside of the military circles?
Again, I honestly don't know. 10 years ago, the answer would have been no.
Yes.
Whether as time has evolved, they're beginning to become more open on it, is a possibility.
A short time later, Bob Exler received this call.
Mr. Exler, this is Tom King in Admiral Inman's office. Yes, you would be breaching confidence and/or violation of the secrecy laws in discussing his involvement in any matter.
I heard what you said earlier, but obviously the big problem always is the pictures are never conclusive.
The pictures, yes, are not conclusive, but when you get involved in an investigation and you find the extraordinary physical evidence left behind, and you talk to the witnesses, medical doctors, officials of governments and so forth, in one of the cases that we had just seen some video from, there was a Canadian official who was actually taken on board the craft. When you subject these areas of testimony to lie detectors, polygraph exams, using the kind of technology that we have to determine whether someone's actually telling the truth or not, the results become absolutely nothing short of alarming.
Okay, if these governments, the Canadian government, the American government, if they are in possession of spacecraft, if they have made contact with aliens, why don't they tell us?
What I was able to learn is that the issue of secrecy dates back into the early 1950s, and in 1959, actually, NASA had a study conducted by the Brookings Institution in Washington, D.C., addressing the issue of whether this alarming issue of a confrontation with an extraterrestrial culture should be released to the public, this information. It was determined that there would be grave consequences for just an overt public pronouncement by government officials. So a determination...
What does that mean? We would all panic?
Well, not necessarily just panic, but the issues that it presented, not only theology, but issues involving economics, standards of monetary concerns. If you acknowledge type of technology that renders fossil fuel-related industries obsolete, yes, for example, you have grave consequences economically all the way around the world.
Of course you do. All our values are rendered
so
useless and worthless then, yes.
The determination was made that the only way to avoid this chaos would be through a slow indoctrination process over a matter of decades.
You really believe? Have you had a close encounter, as they say, or have you seen UFOs?
Well, I wouldn't really call it a close encounter. I think it has more to do with the contacts I've had with the U.S. intelligence community, and being a technologist, being called in to analyze various video films and photographic evidence. It's quite conclusive to me. I have, in fact, seen with my own eyes on quite a number of occasions, well over 20, at very close range, a number of these vehicles. It's quite extraordinary technology. Anybody interested in technology would be, it's like a kid in a candy store, really.
And there's no way that you could be mistaken and it could have been an airplane, helicopter, something of that nature?
Well, Admiral Inman convinced me that these vehicles were not manufactured by human technology, so that's pretty conclusive for me.
Do you think, though, that the government know this is happening, know that it's going on, but why don't they want the rest of us to know? Why do they not want that?
Yes, you are correct. The government, many governments around the world do in fact know. In fact, NATO conducted a study in the 60s involving quite a number of these incidents. The decisions to maintain secrecy regarding this center more around not upsetting the economic apple cart, religion, theology issues that come into play, and quite a number of issues that essentially center around science and technology. We do have to come to grips with the reality that perhaps human beings aren't the only intelligence in the universe, and that they have in fact been here to visit, in spite of projects like the NASA SETI project, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence in deep space. There are serious issues associated with this, and we have a mentality where we like to kind of poke fun at the issue through tabloids and so forth.
And like this kind of thing, this is what we perceive an alien to be like.
Well, these are actual photographs taken from a case up in Canada that have indeed been authenticated by a Canadian government official who was taken on board the craft and apparently had some form of telepathic communication with the occupants, the pilots of the vehicle, as you might say. They are different than us, but it's interesting to note that they are humanoid, and that they have 2 arms and hands and 2 eyes and so forth. They're quite much like us, only in significant ways they're different. Of course, if there's one that comes, there's obviously going to be more. And just like we have different species of humans on this planet, I'm quite certain there's different species of alien life forms. So we could run into malevolence. In fact, President Reagan, on several occasions, alerted concern about the potential hostilities from outer space and why it would be important for us to work together on this planet with superpowers and so on, uniting. Clearly, the problem that we're confronted with here is that although technologically these beings may be more intelligent than us, we appear to be more advanced in areas of civility. We have emotions and things like that, and we have concern for our fellow man, whereas that doesn't seem to be the case necessarily in some of these other cultures.
Bob, thanks very much indeed. It does seem strange though we can't get on with one another in this world, so you wonder whether we will get on with aliens, but thank you.
Right, thank you.
Talk about knowing about a crash retrieval. When was the first time that you were aware of a crash, either Roswell or any other crashes here in the United States?
Well, the first I knew about it was about around the beginning of '47 when I came back from World War II. And I had, in intelligence sources, there was reports that said that UFOs had crashed in different parts of the world, and they were buzzing our planes and so forth. I know about it then, but I didn't know about the Roswell crash then. I learned about the Roswell crash when I was stationed at Fort Riley, Kansas, and I was the duty officer that night. That meant I was in charge of the security of the whole area, including the inspection of the guards, every place where they were. So I went around about 2 or 3 in the morning to the veterinarian area, because we had horses at Fort Riley. And one of the sergeants that I knew was a sergeant of the guard. I used to bowl with him. And I told him, Sergeant, how's everything going? They told me at headquarters that this area was very secure. He said, yes, come on, Colonel. He said, I want to show you something. So he took me back in the back room, and there was 5 crates. They looked like crates there. Lifted up a tarpaulin on one, I did, and here's this body there. At first I thought it was maybe a child, because it was only about 5 feet, shorter than 5 feet. It looked to me. And it was floating in fluid. And then I took a good look at it, and this lasted about 10 or 15 seconds only. And I figured, what is that? And the stomach sort of turned. But that was usual, because in combat, when you see people killed, your stomach starts to turn. But you have to recover fast, especially if you're an officer in command, you have to keep going. I did the same thing that night at Fort Riley. And I covered it up, and I told him, Sergeant, be careful, this is very careful, I don't want you to get in trouble, get out of here. And I'm not going to put it in my report at all.
Okay, what did this, can you describe what this body that you saw?
Yes, I'll describe it. It looked like it had spindly, sort of legs were not big legs, they were sort of spindly. The arms were sort of, I saw 4 fingers, I saw no thumb. And the chest was small, sort of, and the skin looked sort of grayish color. And then the head was large for the proportion of the body. Not real big now, but large. And the eyes were both slanted, sort of. And they had about a half a filament on them. And no nose, no ears, no mouth, just slits.
You say you also had reports on bodies, on alien bodies?
Yeah, that came from Walter Reed.
Were they pretty, I mean, they definitely said not that these were genetic humans or something.
No, here's what, the report, the thing that I was mostly interested in the report was the 2 lobes in the brain. There are 2 lobes there.
Mm-hmm.
And this movie showed part of that. They didn't know what they had, though.
Right.
There was 2 lobes in the brain, and interconnected. And also, the lid. That's where I got the information on the extra lid. Extra eyelid. And we figured that extra eyelid was nothing more than something like our night viewing device. Filtered light.
Mm-hmm.
Did the actual autopsies get done at Walter Reed?
They did this particular autopsy, the paper that I had.
Physically at Walter Reed?
I don't know if it done physically there or not. I couldn't tell you.
Okay, but the report came out of Walter Reed.
The report came out at our laboratory. We financed that laboratory. There was a crash at the plane to St. Augustine.
At the same time as Roswell, or later? Or?
Later. No, about the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the fiber optics came from there. And there was that one that crashed there, had an opening, and there was bodies there too.
Mm-hmm.
St. Augustine was gobbled up in a hurry. Later, something mysterious happened. It disappeared. But anyway, that's another story.
You mean all the material disappeared?
The saucer itself. But anyway, that's...
Oh, let me add.
Yeah, that's...
I mean, did you have
one? They come and take it back, or was it traded back?
There was supposed to be a fire and explosion, but since it didn't exist, nobody could talk about it. You know, one of our greatest covers, I say, was the policy that says that UFOs didn't exist. If ever it didn't exist, there was no crash. If there was no crash, there was no material. Nobody could investigate us because there was no such thing.
Right.
And we played that up. We moved that ahead. The more the debunkers screamed, the more better we liked it. They're doing the disinformation for us.
How far away are you?
The what?
Distance between you and this being?
About from here to the front of the motorhome.
Well, that's like 10 feet?
Yeah. The skin is scaly.
Right.
I think that the skin is atomically alive, so they can travel in space. See, man can't travel in space today.
How long were you in contact? I mean, this is.
I say my two experiences didn't last more than. If you say 2 or 3 minutes, it was a lot. Now I haven't had any other experiences. My only experience was in New Mexico, not on any other place.
Well, what after you got this? A new world, if you can take it, then what happened? Did it just disappear, or did it get in a craft and take off?
I left. I left.
You left.
I went out to my Jeep, got on my radio. I didn't tell the being that I do it. I went out to my radio and got on, and I called my command posts. And I told them, you get green time yet from, I said, yes, they said, it's due coming through any minute. So we could fire again. I told them, when it comes through, I told them, this is an order. Keep our radars down for 10 minutes. And I told them, I repeat the order to the captain. I told him, keep our radar down for 10 minutes. I'm on my way. Then I get a call back on radio when I was on my way. It said, C battery picked up a trajectory going 3,000 miles an hour.
This must have been
I told him, let me see the tape.
Okay, now you had these records from Walter Reed on the autopsies, and you talked about the fact they had this scaly skin that was put together in a certain fashion and so on. Did they ever come to a conclusion like these were manufactured biological robots, or?
The only conclusion was, I think we all came to this together because of the sex organs and the different organs in the lymph systems, lungs and stomach. But it was a clone. Now, if you go back to the days of the Sumerians, they call them Aegis. They say they were ferry drivers, is what they are. The real ones up there, in motherships. Now, no one's ever explored the Sumerian. Sitkin wrote this. Nobody's ever explored the Sumerian civilization. I think the key is there. They disappeared after a while. I think the Sumerians maybe were the mothership. And they tried to wipe out the human race, in those days. But anyway, you got to go back in history and see the Sumerians, what they say. And they called them Aegis, I-G-I-G-I-S.
You think they were manufactured for space travel or time travel or something?
Well, I think they were manufactured as servants. Now, my theory is, what do they want? Here, do they want a new race? Because one of the strangest things, as far as I'm concerned, is on these mutilations, they took the sex organs. And the nearest thing to the human sex organ are cattle sex organs. And by the way, they cut those with a type of laser cutter, which didn't even cut through the cells.
cut around them, yeah.
It cut around the cells. That's how good, how perfect it was. We have no such thing. A handheld cutter, a laser, we have no such thing.
There are those who feel that the government has hardware. Gordon Cooper, again, indicated that he has heard some highly placed rumors concerning crashed UFOs. Retrieval, he says, not only of just the UFO, but remains of bodies. I came closest to a report like this, talking to an individual at GTE who holds a high managerial position, who has a top secret clearance, and who worked as a civilian for the Air Force back in 1953. And his expertise was landing gear and also assessing the damage done to crashed aircraft. And he was on loan to the Atomic Energy Commission out at Frenchman's Flats, Nevada at the time, and he was assessing damage done to bridges and different types of buildings that were subjected to atomic bomb tests from different heights. There'd be atomic bombs on towers and drop a parachute and so forth. And he claims that right in the middle of these tests that he was called away and told to report to a certain office that he was going to have to go on a 2-day mission to a 3-day mission for something that he couldn't write or talk about. And he claims, just briefly, the story goes like this. He was flown from Indian Springs Air Force Base to a civilian airfield in Arizona. I think it was Tucson or Phoenix. I can't remember. I'd have to look at the report. But at the airfield, he was met by an air policeman who escorted him to a military bus that had all the windows blacked out. He got on the bus, and he was told not to talk to anybody, to surrender all his valuables, which he did, and they put him in a cloth bag, put his name on it. A full colonel, after everybody was assembled, told them that they were going to go for a long ride, that they were not to talk to each other, that they were going to investigate the crash of a super-secret vehicle, which they couldn't talk about, and they had to take an oath. And when they finally got there, he thought they drove around for 2 or 3 hours. He didn't know they took his watch away. When they got there was a bright light on the bus, blinding bright light. And when it was his turn to get out, he says he couldn't see anything. This light was just blazing. And when they finally got behind the light, there was this 30-foot in diameter object shaped like a bowl, inverted upon a bowl with a slight rim around it with orifices. And he was told to determine the falling speed and forward speed at time of impact. And that was all. And he wasn't to ask any other questions about the object. He said that there were generators there were power cables going into the object, there was an opening, and there were people inside doing something. There was a tent pitched beside the object with remains of small beings, but he wasn't allowed to ask any questions and so forth. When he got back to the bus, they were all told, each person that went out and did their own thing, that they were going to go back and they were going to handwrite a report of their findings. They were not to type it. They were to call a number. It would be reported. That would be picked up, and they were sworn to secrecy. Now, that's just a peripheral summary of what this fellow told me. I conducted a character reference check, went all the way back from where he works at GTE now, all the way back to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which was Wright Field in those days. Talked to people there, highly placed people who still there, knew this individual. Everybody gave him a clean bill of health. He didn't seek any publicity. There was a movie called Hangar 18 that came out, put out by Sun Classics, and they called me because they knew of this particular sighting that I had investigated. They offered this fellow money through me to do a documentary. He returned it down. He didn't want to compromise the story at all in any way using his name because of his position at GTE and because what his peers would think of him because he had taken an oath. So you have highly placed rumors that they actually have crash retrieval cases. Whether they're true or not, we only can wait and see, but they come from people with impeccable credentials.
Waiting for his friend to arrive, Ray nervously fiddled with his telescopes. He remembered his extensive investigations into the man's reliability as a witness.
In the case of Fritz, I started in 1973, went all the way back to the various companies he worked for, right back to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, talked to people he worked with, and they all gave him a very clean bill of health. A reputable man, honest man, not the type that would fabricate a hoax, and a very efficient engineer manager.
As the man arrived, Ray recalled the years his friend had wavered about breaking an oath of secrecy. He recalled their long arguments about a greater public good. Would the years of patient persuasion at last pay off?
So I understand it, Fritz. You were working for the United States Air Force.
The story began late one night in 1953 at Frenchman's Flat, Nevada. The man had been working as a consultant on blast effects of atom bombs when he was suddenly ordered to report for a new mission.
What happened after that? We were put on a bus, which the windows were all completely covered with curtains and, in some cases, black paper taped to the windows. And we're driven for 3 or 4 hours, and we're not sure just where we were going. Several of us tried to guess where we might have been. We, at that time, came to the conclusion it was in the area of Kingman, Arizona.
After getting off the bus, as recreated here, the scientists were taken to an even more remote location. They had no idea exactly where they were or what they were about to see.
We were told that we had been selected for various technical specialties. And I was told that I was to ask any questions that had to do with dynamic loads and nothing more, and I wouldn't get any answers to any other question. It looked like two saucers, I would call it, one on top of the other, inverted, probably 25 to 30 feet in diameter. In terms of something known, what kind of metal would it look like? Well, it would look like a brushed aluminum. I'm sure it probably wasn't that. I say that because I noticed no scratch marks. And anything that would penetrate into the sand 20 inches that way would certainly have some scratch marks. No signs of buckling, fracture, or anything? Not that I could see. I accepted it was probably some United States government vehicle, a highly classified vehicle. In fact, we were told that that's what it was. Interestingly enough, one of the questions I needed to know was what the mass of the vehicle was. I could tell a lot of things from the penetration into the desert sand and so forth, but I needed to know the mass. And they told me that they weren't going to let me know that. They perhaps didn't even know themselves. There was also a tent, which I didn't get to look into, but one fellow whom I did happen to talk with briefly until they told us to stop talking, said that he had seen two bodies inside this tent, two alien-looking bodies. It was brown, leathery skin, had a silver, like a cap on, without a bill. Like a skull cap? Yes, like a skull cap. I realized what this really started to mean, but I also at the same time realized probably why the government was keeping it classified. There are a lot of things that could be changed by our culture or religions. There are a lot of things that could be affected by the release of information like that at that particular time.
They pulled the big covers off this thing, and it was interesting. It's an engine that's about the size of a school bus. And this engine is pretty much a much larger version of the thing I built. It's also an electric magnetic fusion containment engine, but it is sophisticated and it is powerful. I would have to compare mine to it. Would be like I had a Model A and this thing was a Ferrari. I mean, it's just tremendous, powerful difference, but we both were of the same engine breed. And this one had been damaged right in the center of the core. In the type of configurations we build, we have dual particle accelerators that cause the fusion reaction. Right in that center of these accelerators is an area that I call the eye of the hurricane, and it's like an infinity pattern, figure 8, and right in the center, it's quiet there on a matter of conversion area. So then this particular engine was a hole there about 4 feet in diameter, and that was the first thing I noticed. They asked me to look at it and describe to them how I thought the thing functioned. And I asked them, you know, how come I'm telling you about your engine? And they said that the engine was recovered in a project they was working with, and they wasn't sure how everything functioned on it, and personnel that were available that work on that was not available anymore. And they said if I could just help them out a little bit. Well, being 17 years old at the time, they thought I didn't pick up on too many adult innuendos, but I guess I was born old. I knew exactly what they were doing. So I said, fine, yeah, I'll be glad to help my country, Yeah. So we play along, and I asked them, can I walk up to it? They said, sure. As a matter of fact, you can climb on it if you want. So I got up to the engine, and then something really unusual about the engine, other than the design, the alloys itself, just the sheen and color, looked like iridescent color, like when you hold a CD disc to the sun and you see the rainbow. Imagine those kind of colors covering this entire engine and glowing like that. It's really pretty. The color of the engine was unlike any metal or alloy I was ever familiar with. And when I walked to the engine, there was a shadow on the engine. Now, I just told you that the rooms were built where you couldn't have shadows. When I stuck my arm out to it, there was a shadow on the engine, but right on the table, there was no shadow. So it's not a light casting the shadow on the engine. The engine is picking up radiation off my body. So I back away from it, the shadow dissipates. When I walk back up, it's back on. And so when I put my hands on the engine to pull myself up on it, that's where it's interesting, because the alloys in some places were so thin, it was translucent. You could see through it like a sheet of amber. So when I laid my hands on it, this really interesting swirl pattern would come off wherever my skin was touching, and they would swirl out through the metal, going out through the alloy. And I didn't know of any metal that could do that. So I thought, wow, this thing's heat sensitive. It's picking up my body heat waves like that. So when I crawled, and they were really neat looking, smooth type wave flows coming off my hands. So I pulled myself up on the engine and started walking over it, and it was huge. It was radically different than mine because it was just so much of a different design. And the way they ran the fusion flows and the way you would run fuel in a fuel line of an engine, this thing was totally different. There was no wiring. Now, my engine was covered with miles of wiring, so I could get all the firing orders right toward the cyclotrons, the particle accelerators.
Did you immediately know that it was alien at that time?
I suspected when I put my hands on it, it felt so different. It felt like a frog belly. If you ever, I don't know if people play with frog bellies, but I did. It looked wet, but it wasn't wet. It's just so slick looking, but it wasn't slick. And it was just amazing, but also had such a texture, and as soon as you touched it, it was cold in the air-conditioned well in the facility, but the minute you touched the metal, it became your temperature instantly. I don't know of any alloys that can do that. So I started going, oh, this may not be from around here. So I'm walking down the engine, and I go up to where the main core cells are in the particle accelerators. There's a hole blown out there, and I step down into it, just get a better look. Now, at this point of view, I'm down in the hole in the engine, and the walls are real smooth. They're so smooth, the blast, these temperatures like that engine of mine, they run at 100 million degrees centigrade. You work with plasma physics. So when the field dropped down, this engine's metals were exposed to that kind of temperature, vaporized. But as soon as it vaporized at that particular point, fail-safe, it shut the engine off. All this probably occurred in a nanosecond, a billionth of a second. So the blast only irradiated out to about 4 feet in diameter and stopped. What was interesting is the way the engine's metal was whenever there's torn places. You could rub your hands over the torn areas that are jagged, but they wouldn't cut you because they're so smooth. It's more like flesh being torn rather than metal. Well, when I come up, stood back up on top of the engine, I knew, looking at some of the interior parts of it and the way it was constructed, I had enough of what was going on. So I turned around and told them about this firing system here. And they were going, yeah, where is the firing system? And I started to tell them that because I finally figured out what this thing was doing. But then I said, well, why am I telling you about your own firing system if all this is yours and you got, this isn't from here, is it? Matter of fact, it ain't from around the area, is it, boys? And they started getting upset. I said, let's do some assumptions. This is an engine. I'm assuming it came out of a craft, a big one, by the size proportional differences, probably 300 feet plus, you know, the length of a football field. Well, therefore, it's got occupants. What in God's name have you done with them? Well, that was the wrong thing to say, because they are up on the engine coming after me, and it's time to leave. Well, when I bend down to get off the engine, I put my hands back on the engine. Something interesting. Instead of the nice smooth wave lines, they would now look like small tornadoes coming off all my fingertips, moving through the metal. And I pulled my hands back, put them back on. There they were, but they were starting to calm down a little bit. And then I realized what this thing was. They grabbed hold of me, the Air Force guys did. We got back in the golf cart and we were riding back up to the surface. And I was sitting there thinking, I just realized what this engine is. It's a symbiotic engine. The engine is alive. It is an engine that's capable. The reason they couldn't figure out the firing order is that the tubing that was cascading all over its body looked like the same pattern you would have from a brainstem of a neurosynaptic ordering firing order. So what's happening is when the pilots sit down in their seats, their thought waves drive the engine. When I first touched the engine, I was curious and awed by it. The wavelengths were smooth off my fingers. When I was getting off down from it, I was totally angry. The engine was not picking up radiation heat waves. It was picking up mental fault energy. That engine is capable of a symbiotic relationship with the pilots.
Did you tell them that?
I didn't tell them squat. That's why they couldn't figure out the firing order. They said there was no wiring or circuitry. No, the pilots' brains are the wiring and the circuitry. The engine needs them in order to do all of its functions. In return, the pilots know exactly what the engine feels and how the spacecraft feels. The entire craft is probably symbiotic. Now, before you sit there and blow this off like it's just a bunch of science fiction, let me bring you up to date here to current events. I just left Princeton University. There's a Dr. John up there, Robert John, and he runs the Pear Research Institute. They have a contract from McDonnell Douglas, you ever heard of them? Small aerospace company, to build mental shielding for firing systems on the new F-22 fighters. So people go, what's that got to do with anything? Pilot comes home at night, catches his wife in bed with another man. He's having a bad day. He's now got to go fight a fighter that is so sensitive. When he straps on his helmet, just like the Apache helicopter, you turn your head this way, the gun mounts follow your head. This firing system now links to your brain. Foxfire, Clint Eastwood. Where do you think the Hollywood's getting their ideas? McDonnell Douglas is under construction building a symbiotic relationship firing control system. Where did they get their idea? I wonder. Could have been back in June 1971, and God knows how long they've had this engine. However, it's reality. We have symbiotic engines in aeronautics. We're moving into that area right now with the F-22 and beyond, with our future fighters. So, which is science fiction, which is science fact? Where does it start and end? You can't tell anymore.
This remarkable woman is Dorothy Kilgallen. She was an extremely well-connected media personality and nationally syndicated newspaper columnist from the 1940s through the mid-60s. While she was best known to Americans old enough to remember this period of time as a longtime panelist on the then very popular TV show, What's My Line? Make no mistake about it, she was also a very serious investigative writer who maintained a very highly critical attitude of the way that the press had treated the Kennedy assassination and wrote openly and fairly accurately about the UFO cover-up in the 50s and into the 60s. Her column in the now-defunct Journal American, which was read by quite a few million people every week, called The Voice of Broadway, alternated between an old-fashioned celebrity gossip column and hardcore investigative writing. In 1952, for example, she reported on an unidentified flying object that had crashed near Spitsbergen, Norway. Rational concern that the wreck might represent advanced Russian technology was undercut by the testimony of a Norwegian Air Force colonel who claimed that the Board of Inquiry that had looked into this, quote, some time ago, a misunderstanding was caused by saying that the disk probably was of Soviet origin. It has, this we wish to state emphatically, not been built by any country on Earth, end quote. No, I take that back. The quote continues. The materials used in the construction are completely unknown to experts having participated in this investigation. 8 years later, Kilgallen published an article entitled Flying Saucer Wreckage Assures Britain of Reality. It appeared in May 23, 1955 in London's International News Service and was picked up by numerous newspapers there in the Great Britain and abroad, including the Los Angeles Examiner. To quote, I can report today on a story which is positively spooky and to mention chilling, and not to mention chilling. British scientists and airmen are explaining the wreckage of one of mysterious flying ship, and they're convinced that the strange aerial objects are not optical illusions, but are flying saucers that originate on another planet. The source of my information is a British official of cabinet rank who prefers to remain unidentified. We believe, on the basis of our inquiry thus far, that the saucers were staffed by small men, probably under 4 feet tall. It's frightening, but there's no denying the flying saucers come from another planet. The official quoted scientist as saying a flying saucer of this type could not possibly have been constructed on Earth. The British government, I learned, is withholding an official report on the flying saucer examination at this time, possibly because it does not want to frighten the public, end quote. We now know that there were such considerations at this point in the early 50s. When Kilgallen made, while she never made her source public, and she again is talking about a cabinet-level official. This is not some, goofball reporter or hack or cultist. Key investigators have speculated that the account originated with Queen Elizabeth's husband, Lord Mountbatten. Louis Mountbatten was a larger-than-life figure who was involved militarily, diplomatically, and ultimately lost his life in a terrorist bombing in London. Gordon Creighton, a former diplomat and British Army officer, military intelligence officer, went on to become editor of Britain's long-running Flying Saucer Review, which is the longest published UFO publication in certainly the English language in history. After reading her column, Creighton wrote to Dorothy Kilgallen at once seeking further information, but never got a reply from her, and she died a few years later. We can take it as certain that she had been effectively removed, was Creighton's comment after Miss Kilgallen's death was reported. Additional support for this account can be deduced from a statement issued at about this time by Britain's Air Chief Marshal Lord Dowling, who said in part, quote, I am convinced that these objects do exist and that they are not manufactured by any nation on Earth. Talk about disclosure. These are public statements made in the international press more than 60 years ago, and yet, here we are still living in the funk. Air Marshal Dowling, and the shot before was Gordon Creighton. This gentleman is my friend and colleague Timothy Good, one of the most respected UFO writers in the United Kingdom, and certainly the best connected. He noted in his very important book, Above Top Secret, which should be in every UFO library, quote, why should Dorothy Kilgallen risk her reputation as one of the USA's star journalists by propagating an untrue story? To the best of my knowledge, she never denied the story. Furthermore, a number of similar stories from reliable sources have surfaced over the years, not all of which can be discounted, however absurd they may sound, end quote.
This was in the late 60s and 70s. I've met a gentleman that was in the Army, in the CID, that was involved with several crash recoveries when he was in the CID in 1947, when he was inducted in the United States Army. He was in the CID, and several of his friends were in the CIC, counterintelligence, and they became very close one another, and he handpicked a friend of mine that worked at Boeing Aircraft Company in Long Beach to become a part of a crash recovery retrieval in northern northern New Mexico. And apparently he saw some of the aliens and witnessed the craft, and he was put guard around this crash disc that had crashed, and they gave him a M1 carbine rifle to guard anybody that tried to get close to it, and they were given orders to shoot anybody without authorization. They recalled him on several other crashes. They had to fly him with blackened out windows to several of the crash sites, and some of the crash sites were very putrid to smell, and they had to back up about 45 feet away from the craft to escape the smell. He said it smelled like rotting eggs intermixed with rotting mustard. He said it was just horrible.
And this is someone that you knew?
Yes, I personally know him. He's still currently alive.
Is he still working or retired?
Oh, no, he's retired.
And do you know his name?
Yes, I do.
Can you share it?
Not at this time.
Okay. Did you meet anyone else at Boeing that had been involved in this area?
Just one of the security guards that worked there that was working for the Treasury Department, and he left disgusted because of the low pay, and he picked up a job at McDonnell Douglas Aircraft Company because of the better benefits and better pay scale, and he knew people in the Secret Service, and even some of those people in the Secret Service know about the alien connected projects, and that the phenomenon is real. And I found that kind of funny, because of they're not cleared to hear the information. They don't have the classification to hear the information, but yet people in the Secret Service know about it. And I found that kind of hilarious. And I interviewed this security guard at McDonnell Douglas Aircraft Company for about 45 minutes regarding the subject. He was trying to find out where there was one crash that occurred. One crash occurred in. He believes that from his commander it occurred in the desert of New Mexico, northern New Mexico, and there was another one that crashed in Nevada, near Ely, Nevada, and the other crash, a total of 3. He didn't know where it was because nobody wanted to talk about it, and they were all told to shut up.
So when he was on site, he didn't really know where he was because he was flown in on a blackened craft?
Yeah, that's correct. They were taken to several crash areas in an aircraft. They were then landed. They were taken by Jeep. They were told not to look out the Jeep at all, to keep their eyes in one position. They were told not to talk to anybody. They were, in fact, one of the locations, one of the military officers said, he goes, "Gentlemen, we're not here on a Hollywood movie set. This is a highly classified mission. You're not even supposed to talk to your family about this." And they had to sign security oath statements that they would not talk about this for 50 years regarding the crash sites that they were taken to.
My boss came to me and he says, "We've both got a new assignment." And he says, "Oh," I said, "Where are we going?" "Oh," he says, "We're going to the Capitol. We're going to be part of the Eisenhower push." He's trying to find out something about, all about these aliens that MJ-12 was supposed to find out, but never sent back reports to him.
The MJ-12, the UFO control group, were they calling it MJ-12 at that time? Yes.
They called us in, went into the Oval Office, and President Eisenhower was there and Nixon, and they said, we called the people in from MJ-12 from Area 51 and S4, but they told us that the government had no jurisdiction over what they were doing. So being a general, past general, you didn't tell him to go to hell without any real good reason, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, I want you and your boss to fly out there. I want you to give him a personal message. And he says, I want you to tell them, whoever is in charge, tell them that to get in, they have this week, coming week, to get into Washington and to report to me. And if they don't, I'm going to get the 1st Army from Colorado and we're going to go over, we're going to take the base over. I don't care what kind of classified material you got. We're going to rip this thing apart.
Eisenhower was going to invade
Area 51. Yeah, with the 1st Army.
So you go out with your superior.
Yes.
You fly out. You land. What happens? Can you describe this whole process? What you saw?
It took us the 13 or 15 miles south to S4 and like different garage door openings.
Okay.
And in these garage door openings, they had like different saucer crafts. The very first one had the Roswell craft in. It was kind of crashed up, but apparently every alien that was in it died except for a couple.
So you see the Roswell craft, and what are some of the others that you see?
Well, the Roswell craft was really strange because it looked like real heavy aluminum foil. We could rock next to it, and you could rock it. The whole thing probably weighed 150, 300 pounds.
Could they tell what the source of power was of this craft?
Yeah, it was like a reverse gravitational thing of some kind. In fact, one later on, I got the mathematical code for reversing gravity in a 3x5 card. I guess there are different types of grays and so on.
How did you see that evidence?
Well, at the later on at S4, we viewed the autopsy film, and then the colonel said, what we've got in here is we're interviewing a gray alien.
All right, right there. How did you feel at that moment?
Well, I thought, boy, we had no idea we were going to see the real thing. All we saw was film.
You had to have a little bit of heart racing at that moment.
My boss was able to go in and had like a partial interview with him.
So what did this gray alien look like? Could you describe him a little bit?
This one looked a little bit oriental.
So I'm just wondering if it looked almost human, what about this didn't look human?
No, it didn't look human as far as the skin tone and basically the shape of it and the size.
How was its head size compared with a normal human, for example?
Brain was kind of a little bit bigger. And Some of them nose was very, very small, and the ears were just like holes. Mouth was very small.
Now, why were they bringing you out here at all, anyway, to see an alien? What was the point?
To go back and tell the president they actually had one.
So he did not know at this point if there was an alien at S4?
No.
What did you do then at Area? Were you done, or did you have other things to do with
Yeah,
S4?
so basically we were kind of done, went back to Area 51.
Mm-hmm.
They took us into the main building, and there we saw a U-2, which of course we didn't know existed.
Mm-hmm.
And a model of the SR-71.
Yeah, the Blackbird.
So, but like I mentioned earlier, it was not a model of the current Blackbird. Later
an earlier
Blackbird,
version.
But an early version.
Did you go directly to Washington after this?
Yes.
Or did you go somewhere else? How did they get, did you fly regular airline or?
We flew back to the commuter plane back to the air base,
Mm-hmm.
and then took President Eisenhower's Lockheed Electra back to Washington.
You and your supervisor,
Yeah.
superior officer, and now you're meeting with the president?
Yes.
Can you describe this?
Well, we met with him in, the second story of the old OSS warehouse building. And Eisenhower and Nixon were there, and also Hoover was there. So he asked us what was going on, and we told him about the alien, the whole situation, and the black projects and so on, and he was just totally shocked. He appeared for the first time to be worried,
Mm-hmm.
like he was worried.
I would think that Eisenhower would, he certainly knew that flying saucers were real.
Yes.
He knew that there were aliens. So I guess I'm just wondering, what would he have been, really surprised about?
Surprised about the black programs. Eisenhower said, got to keep this thing completely secret.
Mm-hmm.
Can't talk about this.
What about the possibility that there is indeed physical evidence of extraterrestrial visitations to Earth, perhaps locked away in the dark vaults of government secrecy? Astronaut Gordon Cooper is among several authorities who are unwilling to dismiss the theory as pure fiction. Cooper himself has heard rumors of crashed saucers recovered by the military.
There was some accident involving a UFO, and from there it varies greatly. There were occupants in each of the rumors that I've heard, but from there on it varies greatly as to whether they were all alive or some alive, or what the extent of damage was to them, and then as to what happened to them is quite variable. The particular rumors aren't necessarily from people who've been involved, but they come from so many different sources that it would lead you to believe that it certainly is worth investigating a little further. My personal feeling all along has been that I feel that the government should be honest with the citizens of the United States, and I think they really underestimate the intelligence level of the citizens of the country by continually hiding things from them.
Dr. J. Allen Hynek.
Over the years, these rumors have persisted. Hardly a week goes by without my being asked about the crashed saucer stories. My response to these rumors has always been complete skepticism. Recently, however, some of my colleagues, investigative research associates, have probed into these stories, and some intriguing information has surfaced. I believe it is quite worthwhile to let listeners to this record have the benefit of some preliminary findings. In any event, a rather dramatic story has developed. It starts with the following affidavit of one Lieutenant Colonel Robert B. Willingham.
Down at Dice Air Force Base in Texas, we were testing what turned out to be the F-94s. They reported on the scope that they had a unidentified flying object flying at a high speed going to intercept our course. It became visible to us, and we watched it, and we wanted to take after it, but headquarters wouldn't let us go after it, and it played around a little bit, and then we got to watching how it made 90-degree turns at this high speed and everything. We knew it wasn't a missile of any type.
Willingham's sighting occurred late in 1948, but he remained silent about the experience for nearly 30 years, deciding only recently to forsake an oath of secrecy in the public interest for this investigation. When the incident took place, the UFO was originally tracked by a chain of radar stations along the Arctic Circle called the DEW Line, part of North America's air defense system.
So then we conferred it with the radar control station on the DEW Line, and they kept following it, and they claimed that it crashed somewhere down off in the, between Texas and old Mexico border. And we got a light aircraft, me and my co-pilot, and we went down to the site, and we landed out in the pasture right across from where it hit at. So we got over there, they told us to leave and everything else, and then the armed guards come out, and they started forming a line around the area. So on the way back, I seen a little piece of metal, so I picked it up and brought it back with me. There were two sand mounds that came down, and it looked to me like this thing crashed right in between them. But it went into the ground, according to the way the people were acting around it. So we actually never did get right up to the site to see what had crashed. But you could see for, I'd say probably 300 to 500 feet where it had went across the sand, like in there. And it looked to me like, I guess, from the metal that we found, chunks of metal, that it either had a little explosion or it began to disintegrate or something caused this metal to come apart, you know.
After they had left the crash site, Willingham and his co-pilot examined the piece of metal and found it to possess unusual qualities.
It looked like it was something made because it was honeycombed. You know how you make metal for where it will cool faster? In a way, it looked like a magnesium steel, but it had a lot of carbon in it because I tried to heat it with a cutting torch and it just wouldn't melt. A cutting torch with acetylene and oxygen burns at anywhere from 32 to 3,800 degrees Fahrenheit. And it would make the metal hot, but it wouldn't even start to make it yield.
Willingham took the material to a Marine Corps metallurgy lab in Hagerstown, Maryland for analysis. Several days later, he was told that the man he had contacted there had never worked for the lab and that no one else there knew anything about the piece of metal. Willingham adds this postscript.
Well, at that time, all unidentified flying objects, anybody that reported one through the Air Force had to be debriefed on it. Even the radar operators were debriefed on what they had followed on the screen. We were not to even discuss it among the pilots that had seen it, that had been on this mission. We weren't even discussing it among ourselves. We signed papers that we would not discuss it with nobody.
Investigative Research Associates, with the help of former National Security Agency intelligence specialist Todd Zeckel, traced a former aide to an Army general who claimed to have been shown a crashed saucer, which was reportedly being stored and studied at a Virginia military installation in the mid-1960s. Herbert Coyer was a student at a southern university where the one-time general's aide is currently employed. Coyer remembers the incredible account related to him by the former aide in front of two other witnesses who have both confirmed that the conversation did indeed take place.
The story began with a crash of a flying saucer, a small vessel approximately 12 to 13 feet across, in White Sands Proving Ground in New Mexico in 1951. Outside of the vessel, I found one small being in a spacesuit of sorts, approximately 3 to 3.5 feet tall. It was humanoid. The only main difference between them and us, aside from size, was larger eyes. The eyes were noticeably larger. They followed 2 sets of tracks approximately a mile beyond the ship and found 2 more beings also dead. These were taken to Langley Field in Virginia. He toured Langley, and as part of this tour they were shown this vessel, one other ship of the same size. They saw the 3 beings, one of which they had performed an autopsy on, and internally he said they were basically the same as human beings inside. It seems to stick in my mind that one of them was preserved. The vessel had a 1-foot discrepancy between the inner and outer wall that they could not account for. There were no moving parts, no controls of any kind inside the ship, just chairs back to back. And that was it. No means of control, no means of power they could find. And as of the time I heard the story, they had not been able to cut in any way the surface of the ship either.
That astounding story, told to Coyer by the General's aide, remains unproven. But each conversation we had with the aide and other individuals allegedly involved directly with crash saucers had one common denominator, as Dr. Hynek explains.
During the many conversations all of us had with the military officers said to have been involved in some way with the crash saucer incident, they never directly confirmed their stories. But more significantly, each individual also refused to deny his involvement, even after having been given numerous opportunities to do so. Why couldn't they have gotten us off their backs simply by saying the rumors were not true? This they would not do, leading me to believe that these people are indeed fearful to speak candidly about their experiences, whatever they might have been.
Crashed extraterrestrial spacecraft on Earth, recovered by American military officials, and currently in storage somewhere in the United States. Truth or fantasy? President Carter had this to say about the issue of public access to UFO information during the 1976 presidential campaign.
I don't see any reason to keep information like that secret, but there may be some aspects of the UFO information that with which I'm not familiar that might be related to some secret experiments that we were doing that might involve our national security or new weapon systems. I certainly wouldn't release that. But if it was something removed from our national security, in my opinion as president, I would go ahead and release it. I see nothing wrong with that.
Meanwhile, investigative research associates and the Center for UFO Studies will continue to seek the final answer and would welcome any new information which will be held in the strictest confidence.